Welcome to the deep dive. If you've ever looked into joint pain, maybe cartilage issues, or bone density problems, well, you've probably heard the usual stuff. Get more calcium, maybe try some collagen, and definitely try not to become one with your sofa. We're kind of taught to see the skeleton as this separate thing. But the research we dug into for this deep dive, it suggests that whole approach is, well, missing a huge piece of the puzzle. We're focused on fixing the bones, but maybe the real answer is more about the body's chemistry and how it all works together mechanically. Okay, let's unpack this. Because according to what we found, the actual key to stopping, maybe even reversing, skeletal degradation isn't where we usually look. It's not really about the bones directly.
That's exactly it. That's the core idea. Our mission here is to give you a kind of roadmap to halt that long-term degradation. And that means we need to look broader, way past the calcium supplements. We really need to focus on two main areas: getting the right muscle stimulus, and maybe the most surprising part, fixing metabolic issues that actually start in your stomach. Hashtag tag A2. Defining degradation and debunking major myths.
Right. Before we get into the mechanics, though, we should probably nail down the terms. People throw around words like arthritis and osteoporosis almost interchangeably, but they're quite different ways the skeleton degrades, aren't they?
Yeah, we absolutely need to be precise here. Let's start with the joints. You've got arthrosis. That's the actual physical wear and tear, the degradation of the cartilage, those joint surfaces. Super common in knees, shoulders, the spine, especially as we get older.
Okay, so that's the wear. What about arthritis, then?
Arthritis is different. It specifically means inflammation within the joint. It's an inflammatory condition. Arthrosis is the wear. Arthritis is the fire, so to speak.
Got it. Wear versus inflammation. And then for bone density itself, we hear about osteopenia and osteoporosis.
Right. Osteopenia is kind of the first warning sign. It's that stage where your body starts losing the race. It can't regenerate bone as fast as it's breaking it down. The sources point out this often kicks in after 50, particularly for women, with hormonal shifts.
And osteoporosis.
That's the more severe stage. Serious demineralization. That's when the internal structure, the scaffolding inside the bone, called trabeculae, gets really thin and fragile. That's what a bone density scan, a densitometry, actually measures.
Okay, so if someone's told they have, say, advanced knee arthrosis, the wear and tear kind, they feel pain. The obvious conclusion is the arthrosis is the pain, but the research actually challenges that, doesn't it?
It does, and what's fascinating here really is the basic anatomy. Those articular surfaces, the cartilage, they don't actually have nociceptors, no pain receptors there. So the arthrosis itself, the wear, technically doesn't hurt.
Wait, really? So if my knee feels like it's killing me and I have arthrosis, where's the pain actually coming from if it's not the structural damage itself?
The pain, that chronic ache you feel, it comes almost entirely from the inflammation that sets up around the degraded area. That inflammation irritates and presses on the nerves nearby. Often the arthrosis itself might even be the body trying to defend itself, trying to stabilize or immobilize a joint that isn't functioning properly.
Wow. Okay, that completely flips the script on pain. And speaking of flipping scripts, we have to talk about milk, the icon of bone health. We're still told it's the go-to calcium source.
Well, yes, cow's milk is definitely nutritious if you're a calf trying to pack on hundreds of pounds fast. For humans, really, we're designed for maternal milk, maybe up to age 5 or 6. Now, when cow's milk gets fortified with extra calcium, our system has to manage that calcium properly. And often it just doesn't.
Hold on, so all those glasses of milk my grandma made me drink, could they have actually been, like, not helping? Or even worse, it's kind of terrifying, given what we've always been told.
It can be counterproductive if that calcium is malmanaged. If your body can't direct it properly into the bones, where does it go? Well, it can end up sticking to the lining of your arteries and blood vessels, the vascular endothelium. This leads to calcifications. So you might be hardening your arteries instead of strengthening your bones. It connects a dietary myth directly to potential long-term vascular risk. Hashtag 2. The crucial role of movement, the anti-rest paradigm.
Okay, so milk might not be the magic bullet, and pain is more about the inflammation around the wear. Let's shift to something universal. Our love affair with the sofa. Sedentary lifestyles are common, and weirdly, sometimes medical advice seems to encourage it for joint issues.
And this is where we hit a really significant point of error in a lot of standard advice. For someone dealing with advanced knee arthrosis or maybe early osteoporosis, the typical instruction is often, look, avoid impact, rest the joint, no running, no jumping. The sources we looked at are very clear. This is a grave error.
But why? Instinct just screams rest equals healing. Why would resting be catastrophic for these conditions?
Because rest actually speeds up the degradation process dramatically. It's all about how joints, especially cartilage, get their nutrition. If you look at cartilage closely, it's white, right? Because it doesn't have its own direct blood supply.
Okay, no direct blood supply. So how do they get nutrients, minerals, everything they need? Is this where the don't rest idea comes in?
Exactly. They get nourished by a kind of pumping action. The technical term is imbibition. Every single time you walk or run or create some kind of impact, you are mechanically forcing nutrients and fluid into the joint structure and at the same time pushing waste products out, repose, resting. It just stops that pump cold. The second you stop moving consistently, you essentially stop feeding the joint.
Wow. So movement is feeding the joint. We have to move. If rest is the enemy, what kind of movement is essential, especially if someone's already got some degradation happening? Does it have to be intense?
You need to generate muscle contraction. Lifting weights is key, regardless of your age. It's not just about the mechanical impact for that imbibition pump, although that's vital. Muscle contraction itself actually synthesizes specific hormones, internal signals that are absolutely crucial for bone and joint regeneration. If you're not moving, you're not making those internal repair chemicals.
And the sources also mentioned it's not just any movement, right? It should ideally integrate other lifestyle factors.
Absolutely. The best results come when movement is combined with other natural stimuli. Getting some sun exposure for vitamin D synthesis is huge. Even using thermal stimuli, strategic use of cold or heat can enhance the body's overall regenerative capacity. It's thinking holistically, not just isolating one type of exercise.
Okay, the movement part makes a ton of mechanical sense. Now let's pivot to what might be the most surprising link the sources highlighted, the chemical connection between your stomach health and how strong your bones are. This feels like the really deep part of the dive.
Yeah, this is fascinating. To get it, we need a quick refresher on how bones actually maintain their strength. Bone isn't static. It's constantly remodeling itself. There are two main processes fighting it out. Osteoclastogenesis, that's the breakdown, like tearing down an old wall. And osteoblastogenesis, that's the rebuilding, putting up a new wall. Osteopenia and osteoporosis happen when the tearing down consistently outpaces the rebuilding.
Okay, makes sense. Tearing down versus building up. But connecting that to the bigger picture, why on earth would the body deliberately ramp up the destruction process? It sounds completely self-defeating.
It boils down to chemistry and, honestly, survival priorities. Your body has to maintain a very, very precise pH balance system-wide. It's critical. And the stomach, being the most acidic organ, is actually the primary manager, the controller of the entire body's acidity and pH levels.
Right, the stomach manages the whole system's pH. So what happens when people are constantly taking medication for things like chronic acid reflux or heartburn or gastritis?
They often end up on chronic antacids, particularly a class called proton pump inhibitors or PPIs. The research we reviewed really stresses this. The chronic, often long-term or poorly managed use of these PPIs essentially shuts down or severely inhibits the stomach's critical job of controlling acidity and managing that systemic pH.
Okay, so if I'm taking PPIs every day, the main organ that's supposed to manage my body's internal pH balance is basically offline thanks to medication. Now, if the body needs to generate some metabolic acidity somewhere to compensate for an imbalance, but the stomach can't do its job, where does it turn? What's plan B?
And that is the absolute core insight from these sources. If the primary system, the stomach, is disabled, the body desperately seeks another way to buffer its pH. And where does it find a readily available source of mineral buffers it can use to adjust acidity? By degrading bone. It literally dissolves bone to release minerals like calcium phosphate to balance the pH. The sources are quite direct. Chronic use of antacids and also things like corticosteroids or even strong, long-term analgesics can directly pave the way for arthrosis and osteoporosis by forcing the body to cannibalize the skeleton as a pH backup system. Hashtag IV. Actionable solutions for regeneration.
That is just staggering, really. If antacids are potentially a major driver of bone loss, where does someone even start to try and fix that potential damage? Obviously, you can't just stop necessary medication cold turkey, and we know popping supplements won't magically fix everything if the gut itself is a mess.
Exactly. You absolutely have to start with the foundation. Supplements, no matter how good they are, won't work optimally if your digestion isn't functioning properly. If you have underlying issues like chronic indigestion, dysbiosis, SIBO, that has to be addressed first. The stomach needs to be healthy, or at least working better. This might involve working with a healthcare professional to perhaps safely reduce or taper off PPIs if appropriate, but definitely focusing on optimizing digestive function is step one.
Right, foundation first. So Once the gut is in a better place, what are some concrete dietary things we can do? Things that support not just the bones, but also the liver, which you mentioned is important for managing minerals.
The source material really highlights something they call a miraculous food, bone broth. Seriously, they emphasize it quite strongly. It does two key things. It provides the raw building blocks that can help improve bone regeneration directly, and it's apparently fantastic for hepatic regeneration, helping the liver function better. A healthier liver is much better at managing and resorbing the minerals your bones need. The advice is to consume it frequently, let the benefits accumulate over time. Maybe even first thing in the morning.
Bone broth, okay. Makes sense. What about beyond broth? Any specific dietary advice for joint health and maybe tackling that inflammation we talked about earlier?
Yeah, focus on including fish regularly. The source mentions it as an excellent base. And prepare it with strong, potent spices. Think turmeric, black pepper, which helps turmeric absorption, garlic, and ginger. These are highlighted specifically for their powerful anti-inflammatory effects, which directly targets that pain component, the inflammation surrounding the joint wear.
Okay, fish, spices, bone broth, healthy gut. Now, supplements. The sources say they only complement good habits, and we've established movement and gut health are the big priorities. So when it is time for supplements, how do we navigate that huge list of options, often marketed for joints and bones?
Right, supplements are the backup singers, not the lead vocalist here. If your main concern is the joint surface, the cartilage, then the standard stack often includes hydrolyzed collagen, which is a large molecule but can be useful, glucosamine, and chondroitin sulfate. There are also more targeted things like osteoblast peptides and cartilage peptides.
And for bone density itself, for tackling osteopenia or osteoporosis.
For density, the key anti-osteoporotic stack revolves around vitamin D3 and vitamin K2.
But I have to jump in here because the source included a really important, critical warning about K2, didn't it?
Yes, absolutely crucial. Vitamin K2 should not be taken by people who are on anticoagulant medications, blood thinners like warfarin or Coumadin. It's essential, absolutely essential to talk to your doctor about K2 if you are on any kind of anticoagulant therapy. It's contraindicated.
Okay, very important warning. And finally, after doing all this, fixing the gut, moving, eating well, considering the right supplements, how do we make sure we actually absorb them properly?
That's the final piece, and it's often missed. Those key vitamins we just mentioned, D3 and K2, they are fat-soluble. That means they must be taken with some form of healthy fat to ensure your body can actually absorb and utilize them effectively. Think high-quality olive oil, maybe some coconut oil, or clarified butter. Ghee. Taking them on an empty stomach or just with water means they likely won't get absorbed properly. #tagouttrop.
So what does this all mean? What's the bottom line here? Well, it means you really do have significant power to influence your long-term skeletal health. But the path might be, well, counterintuitive. It seems to involve prioritizing consistent, even impactful movement, really focusing on your stomach's health and pH balance, and maybe questioning some long-held beliefs about needing to rest joints or chug milk constantly.
Exactly. The complexity here just shows we have to look at the body as an interconnected system. Long-term bone and joint health isn't just about targeting the bone in isolation. It's about managing your muscle stimulus, understanding your stomach's critical role in pH, supporting your liver's function, and ensuring your body actually has the right resources and the ability to use them to rebuild itself.
Okay, so thinking about the essential role of impact and movement, that necessary pumping action to feed your joints, here's something to consider. What one small, maybe even tiny, impactful movement change could you realistically introduce into your routine starting today? How could you start leveraging that power of pumping for your own long-term bone health? Even if it's just committing to 1 minute of intentional impact, like marching firmly in place or doing a few careful jumps, maybe just start there and start moving your body to feed your joints.